questions, actually. First, Ken, why not use violence to eliminate opposition and allow for the growth of your own ideology? Um,
I can answer a quick one on that one because
God,
it doesn't. It
Jesus.
doesn't. It doesn't just end. Okay, when all your opposition is dead,
thank
then you
you.
go into faction. It's just a culling technique.
Yeah, and not only that, Hitler. Anyone?
I
um,
think the number one thing, like forgetting to go to the extremes of Godwin's law, which we could easily do, but is the idea of just looking at the Iraq situation as it's been fluid throughout the last, basically my whole life. So not going into the first place against Saddam once you already armed Saddam in another conflict, and then you go to the first
mhm.
Gulf War. The other situation that I think that is obviously part of that question is I don't think the population wants that done.
Yeah.
And also, there's been obvious lies, weapons of mass destruction being one. The first Iraq War, the idea of the Saudi ambassador, who we didn't know is the Saudi ambassador's daughter, who claimed that babies were overthrown in incubators.
Hmm.
These are the things that get people into war, and so these are the things that once again, as a bar bet or as a conversation of, in theory, why not do this or the other? Well, in practice, it's really messy and it's very cyclical. So that would be my answer. Why not use violence? Well, because welcome to the West Bank.
Yep.
Like it's just
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
don't want to live in a society that is scared to walk down the street.
And
Because,
speaking of violence, you will get my fun commentary tomorrow on Dana Loesch responding when she was hold on, when she was prohibited from carrying a gun at her Texas book signing. That will be fun. We haven't we short on time and we got a couple more questions, so let's do them. Dan, we have the question from Simplicity. Do you believe the country will eventually embrace atheists as an acceptable group to hold higher offices? Either Canada or U.S. I think Canada before the U.S.
Canada already
Frankly.
has, yeah. So
Okay.
that's sort of I don't we don't talk about religion at all in elections ever. Like it gets brought up amongst listen, there's a way to game those communities to come out for you, and the conservatives do it very successfully in the last few years. But it's not an election, it's not a ballot box question. We don't talk about Nobody brings it up is my point. So Canada's
Okay.
off the table with that. With America, it's going to be I think it's going to be a
Yeah,
long
I
time.
agree, and I bet Jimmy Bear asked this a while back, and I agree with you. It's going to be a while for the U.S. Silas,
Yeah.
would you like to chime in on that before I go to the next question, or Dell, real quick?
Well,
Re- Go
religion is
ahead, Del.
part of political. Religion is part of political life. Over here, if you're not a major politician and you're not really religious, then you're not really going to be prime minister. So religion is still a factor.
Okay, fair
It
enough.
always will be because a certain population at the moment register themselves as middle class and semi-religious, especially in the UK or in England.
And we have two more questions that I want to get through real quick. But Silas, answer real quick before I get.
No, go ahead. Go to the question.
Okay. Why do so many Americans and Canadians think Canada was a peaceful place prior to the Ottawa shootings? You're the Canadian, Dan. Go ahead.
Listen. I think that this kind of gets to the. I'm sure he wants your American perspectives more than mine,
Yeah.
but I'll give you the Canadian perspective for somebody who does news and politics in Canada. I don't think Americans know anything about Canada, so I think that they know very very little. If we were to test most Americans on Canadian politics or Canadian culture, they would score very low. I mean, we've actually had television shows up here that just did man on the street segments called Talking to Americans on the CBC with Rick Mercer in the 90s, in the early 2000s, that did like the best ratings on the CBC ever, because there's nothing more that we love in Canada than to kind of titter behind America's back. So that's a big part of it.
Until we invade.
They don't know anything about Canada, I would argue, is probably the biggest reason. And also because if you use the bar of America, if you use that bar, it's like, if you say the next door, how does that other place look? Like the guy who lives next to Jian Ghomeshi looks like a great boyfriend. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's American Canada. So I think that's also the bar
Fair
is
enough.
America's democracy. I did a show last week on the Ron Placonge TYT show, and he was asking me these questions too, like So American media did so much better than Canadian media. Canadian media did so much better handling it than our media does. And I go, yeah, but your media is not my bar for journalism. I think it did an okay job for Canadian media, but I don't think we should take a victory lap. So I think that's the main key is why did they think it was peaceful? Because they don't really know about it. Like you saw the actual ignorance of it. Ironically enough, you saw how little they really got Canadian culture 2 weeks before that when I'm not sure how many people know this story, but Anita Sarkeesian in Utah got threatened, bomb threat, and also the person wrote in and said, I'm going to do a Montreal massacre style shooting.
Oh,
so Anita Sarkeesian's Canadian, born in Canada, and that's a huge deal here. Like that, I said, I hate how we have to compare things. You have to be like, this is kind of like 9/11.
Yeah.
It's not. It's so different. But if you could imagine one of the worst national tragedies in a country, like one of the biggest scary things that happened here, that is one of those events. And America didn't blink. It became a gun debate about freedom. But they didn't understand it. If you said, I'm going to literally do 9/11 on that school, and somebody's like, maybe we shouldn't have guns that night, I think you might have been like, all right. But so there goes another example of I don't think America knows the history of Canadian violence.
We have one, Dan, I think you'll agree with my answer for this one from Psycho, asks, why are so many Americans geography absolute crap? I'd say because the education budget sucks donkey dick, and nobody cares about. Even outside of the state realm. Let's be honest. Even outside of a state realm, nobody cares unless it's in their little bubble. And that kind of goes back to the whole question that we were talking about religion today. Unless it's in their bubble and their experience, there are a few that will do it, but a large majority of people who don't do politics.
That's what drives me insane, Tom. It's this push away from the facts.
Yeah.
The facts that you need. Okay, this isn't about America anymore. We are running out of resources. We are getting the squeeze on, especially water at the moment. Water is going to be the big thing in the next 25 years.
Oh yeah, Silas.
The lack of water.
Silas,
okay, you need to have some sort of reference of the world, and it's no point if you don't know where someone is.
Well,
I think.
But water's a problem already.
Yeah.
In 5 years, it's going to be an even bigger problem. In 10 years. Water is going to be a more valuable commodity than petroleum.
And it shouldn't be a commodity at all. But back to the question at hand. Do you agree with me that a lot of it's the bubble and it's education dollars that aren't spent because the Republicans would rather do charter schools and then
Tom, in my mind, education is central to the malaise that affects the United States. We have a piss-poor public education system, and it's unconscionable that we have universities strewn across this country that are making obscene profits and putting graduates into debt. Mm-hmm. To me, that's immoral. That's the definition of immorality.
No, I agree.
Education is not something that you should profit off of, just like it's like profiting off of healthcare. To me, that's immoral as well.
And Dan, your Canadian perspective, you've been a champion of this. I got to congratulate you. You were on the ball like I've been trying to be since Silas pointed it out about the water issue and doing lots of water stories. You've been the privatized school guy before. You've been that guy, and I really want to congratulate you on that, because if anybody has been shining a light before last week tonight, and all those guys, that's one thing you've done balls to the walls great on. So
thank you. That's nice of you to say.
Go ahead.
To flip that, actually, to talk about that, I think that's why you can say, I don't know if it's all an education problem, because Canada has those similar education problems in America, but does better when we speak of geography and those kinds of things. I will argue you that it has a lot more to do with your imperialism and being number one. I think that there's this innate world of like, we're number one. Why do we care about everyone else? Like, and we're not number one in Canada. We have a lot of different, so we have to learn about everybody else. We're a smaller country. We worry.
You worry. You're the little worry word of North America.
We have to pay attention to what's happening on the planet. And we've always been kind of somebody who like can't roll out jets and go guns blazing. That culture is starting to change. But so we kind of were the ones who were sent to peacekeep. And when you go peacekeeping, you end up in a lot of different places in the world, and you're interested where your people are. So, America, there's the old joke from everywhere else in the world, Americans learn geography. If it wasn't for war, Americans wouldn't know geography.
Yep.
And that's sort of, I think, the through line, but that a lot of people would say. But I really think you're absolutely right. It does have to do with education, but it also has to do with just there is a lack of curiosity about the world, I think. And I think that stems from your dominant culture of we are running the damn planet. We are number one. Like, I'm interested to move to America sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. Other people are interested to go to your country. That is why it's a great country. You have like an entertainment system and an independent culture that I don't have here in Canada, and I'm trying to build it, but I don't know, to be honest with you, some days if it will take. There's just not enough people, and
talking about you just said about Canada, and then knowing about the places where you're going, and then or finding out about the places where you get there. Okay, when it all changed for us, when I was in the army in the mid '80s, and the Cold War ended. And then suddenly we were going to Kuwait. There was a huge, great political shift. And we didn't just have to find out about Iraq and desert warfare. We were given lectures about it. We had homework, okay? I thought I'd left school for homework. That's what I said about that tweet earlier, Tom. Oh, God, first day back, homework.
Yep.
And that's what they did. We had to find out about Iraq and its history.
Yep.
I mean, we're soldiers. We weren't at school. We had to find out about it because we were going to attack them.
No, you're exactly right, Dale.
How we did it over here. We actually had to go out and find out ourselves.
No, and Dan, I'm glad. I know we irritated some listeners, but I'm gonna put the questions up on the YouTube channel later because I really appreciate your answers on that, and maybe some of the discussion if I can edit it down somehow, or maybe I'll just throw the whole damn thing up because this is worth listening to, and either way. But I appreciate you surprise coming on.
I said I felt bad because I missed your Halloween show.
Yeah, there you go. See now you've replenished it and you pissed off some of my listeners. So